All right, so today we're going to jump into some psychology stuff. We're doing a deep dive into Alfred Adler. He's maybe not as well known as someone like Freud, but his work is like really powerful, especially if you're looking for some practical way to like boost your well-being.
Yeah, no, you're right. He doesn't get as much attention as some of the others, but his ideas are super relevant, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're using The Courage to Be Happy as our main source. Think of it like a cheat sheet to understanding and, more importantly, applying Adlerian psychology to your own life.
Okay, so the book doesn't like beat around the bush. It says straight up that really grasping Adler's ideas is tough. It's not like a quick fix or like a five-step plan to just be happy.
Yeah, it's not about quick fixes. And in fact, the book actually compares it to those Catholic missionaries who traveled to like completely new worlds centuries ago. Imagine the dedication that it took to adapt to foreign cultures and languages and to hold on to your beliefs while being surrounded by so much that was unfamiliar. It's that kind of commitment that Adlerian psychology requires.
Wow, okay, so that's a pretty serious comparison. So if it's not about quick fixes, what is the core idea here? What did Adler want us to understand?
Well, one of the most fundamental concepts is the separation of tasks. It's about recognizing what you can control, which is your own behavior and choices, and letting go of what you can control, which is everyone else's.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense, like in theory. But how does that play out in real life?
Okay, so let's say you're feeling frustrated because a teammate isn't meeting deadlines. It's tempting to try to micromanage them or get annoyed, right?
Oh, totally. Been there for sure.
But Adler's would say, hang on a sec, is it your task to make them work faster? Or is your task to do your best on your part of the project? Focusing on what you can't control just drains your energy and doesn't actually solve the problem.
Yeah, I see that as like choosing to focus on my own lane rather than stressing about what's happening in someone else's.
Exactly. And this idea of separation of tasks really comes into play when Adler talks about education. He had some strong opinions about raising kids to be self-reliant.
Yeah, and the youth in the book even says that Adlerian education is basically like teachers giving up on their jobs. It's like no praise, no punishment, just let kids do whatever. That sounds a little wild to me.
Well, it's not that they're being passive. Adler just believed that constantly praising or rebuking kids makes them dependent on external validation. It's like it becomes about pleasing the adult rather than developing their own internal compass.
So instead of saying like, good job, or you should be ashamed of yourself, it should be more about helping them to understand themselves and the world around them.
You're getting it. He called this human knowledge, understanding yourself, understanding others, and knowing how to navigate your community. It's about giving kids the tools to become self-sufficient, not trying to mold them into what we think they should be.
Okay, so that's a pretty different way to think about education, like a pretty big shift. But how do you actually do that? How do you guide kids towards this? Human knowledge without controlling them.
That's where respect comes in. You can't force someone to respect you, just like you can't force a ball to come back after you throw it at a wall.
Huh, good point.
You have to give respect to even have a chance of receiving it back. And this is where things get really interesting, because Adler had this concept, Gemeinschaftsgefühl, which means social feeling.
Oh, okay, that's a mouthful. But what does that actually mean?
It's about that feeling of belonging, that feeling of being connected to something larger than yourself. Think about a time when you were part of a team working towards a common goal, maybe like a volunteer project or even just a really great study group.
Yeah, I can remember times like that, just feeling so energized and motivated. Everyone was working together and supporting each other.
Exactly. That's the feeling Adler was getting at. He later refined this concept into a more practical guideline, concern for others. And this is where empathy comes in.
Okay. Empathy. So we're not just talking about feeling sorry for someone.
Right. It's not pity. It's about trying to understand someone else's perspective, even if you don't agree with them. So let's say you have a student who is constantly disrupting class. Instead of just labeling them as a problem child, try to see the world through their eyes. What might be going on in their life that's making them act out?
So instead of judging them, I'm trying to understand their behavior.
Yes, and that understanding can be the key to helping them. Which brings us to another key idea. Adler believed that understanding someone's present goals is more important than dwelling on their past.
So not about digging up like their childhood traumas or blaming their past experiences.
Not necessarily. He focused on what he called teleology, which is basically understanding behavior by looking at its purpose, its goal. So let's say someone's constantly putting themselves down instead of saying, well, they have low self-esteem because of their parents. Adler would ask, what are they gaining from this behavior? What's their goal?
So maybe they're trying to avoid responsibility or trying to elicit sympathy.
Exactly. They might be choosing to stay stuck in that negative pattern because it serves a purpose, even if it's a painful one. And this gets to the heart of why change can be so difficult.
Yeah. So because we're attached to our current goals, even the unhealthy ones?
It can feel like death itself, Adler said, because to change mean letting go of who you are right now, even if that identity is causing you pain.
Wow, that's a powerful image. We cling to what's familiar, even if it's hurting us, because the unknown is scary.
And that's why people sometimes get stuck in those negative cycles. It's easier to blame the past than to face the challenge of becoming someone new.
Okay, so understanding the goal behind someone's behavior is key. But how do you actually help them change? There's that story in the book about the woman who was acting like a dog. How do you even begin to address something that extreme?
That is a powerful story. And what's fascinating is that Adler didn't try to analyze her past or use, any fancy techniques. He simply treated her with respect as a human being, even though her behavior was so different.
So he just kept talking to her, even though they was acting like a dog.
Yes, for days. And eventually she started responding. She started talking again. Adler believed that her behavior stemmed from being treated poorly like a pet by her mother. He saw her actions as a way of rebelling, of communicating her pain, even if it was an unconventional way to do it.
Yeah, it's almost like that was the only way she felt like she could express herself.
Exactly. And by meeting her where she was at, by focusing on her present goals, rather than getting lost in her past, he helped her to find a new way to connect.
That's incredible. We were talking earlier about how Adler was against using praise and punishment in education, but I'm honestly still a little skeptical. I mean, haven't we all experienced how a little encouragement can boost someone's confidence?
I understand where you're coming from, but let's think about why Adler was so against those methods. Remember that analogy in the book about using a magnifying glass to burn ants?
Oh, yeah. Definitely not a proud moment from my childhood, but I see what you mean.
Right, it's about focus. When we praise or punish, it's like we're holding a magnifying glass up to the child's behavior, making them dependent on external approval.
So instead of developing their own internal sense of what's right or wrong,
Yes.
so always looking to us to tell them if they're good or bad.
Exactly. And this can actually lead to some pretty negative outcomes. Think about it. When kids are constantly seeking praise, they start comparing themselves to others, competing for attention, and sometimes even feeling envious or resentful.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like they're trapped in this cycle of needing validation from outside sources instead of developing a sense of self-worth from within.
You got it. So instead of praise and punishment, Adler focused on fostering self-reliance. Let kids make their own choices, even if they mess up sometimes. Provide guidance and support, but ultimately, empower them to take ownership of their actions. Think back to that example in the book about the kid who was labeled a problem child.
Yeah, I remember that. I was thinking, see, praise does work. But then you were talking about how it wasn't just any praise. It was a specific kind of praise.
Right. It wasn't just empty flattery. It was genuine acknowledgement of his effort, of his engagement with the material. It recognized his inherent ability to learn and grow.
So it wasn't about manipulating him with a good job sticker. It was about seeing his potential and respecting him as a capable individual.
Exactly. And this idea of fostering self-reliance is crucial for what Adler called the life tasks, the challenges we all face in our relationships.
The life tasks, what are those?
He identified three main ones: work, friendship, and love. And all of them are fundamentally about navigating the complexities of our connections with others.
Okay, so that's pretty much everything. So he's saying that all of our problems stem from relationships.
He did believe that, yes. But here's the thing. He wasn't saying we should avoid relationships altogether. In fact, he believed that all the joy we experience also comes from those connections. It's about finding a balance.
So we don't run away from relationships. Just because they can be tough, we learn how to navigate them in a healthier way.
You're getting it. And a big part of that is learning to build genuine friendships, which he saw as the foundation for community feeling. And where do we first start to learn those skills?
Oh, I bet you're going to say school.
You got it. School is like a microcosm of society. It's where kids get to practice interacting with others, resolving conflicts, and building those important social bonds.
Oh, but does that mean I should be buddies with my students? That doesn't feel quite right.
I see the confusion. Adlerian friendship isn't about being besties with everyone. It's about having a certain attitude or approach to relationships. He actually made a distinction between trust, which we often see in work relationships, and confidence, which is the bedrock of friendship.
Oh, interesting. I always kind of thought of those words as interchangeable. How are they different in this context?
Think about it this way. You can trust a colleague to finish a task on time, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have confidence in them as a person. Confidence goes deeper. It involves accepting someone as they are, flaws and all, believing in their inherent worth, even when they make mistakes.
That's deep. So I can trust someone to do their job, but having confidence in them means I believe in them, regardless of their performance.
Exactly. And that kind of confidence is what allows for truly authentic connections.
Wow, okay, you're making me rethink how I approach my relationships. Okay, so work, friendship, that brings us to the big one, love. How did Adler view something as complex and confusing as love?
He actually said something pretty thought-provoking. He said, "We receive education on tasks we accomplish individually and tasks we accomplish with others, but we receive no education on the tasks accomplished by two people."
Tasks accomplished by two people. Okay, I'm intrigued.
He was talking about love. He saw love not as a feeling that just washes over you, but as a collaborative effort, a task that two people work on together, consciously and intentionally.
So it's not about finding that one perfect soulmate who completes you.
Right. It's not choosing to invest in a relationship, to commit to each other's growth and well-being, even when things get tough. He believed that love isn't something that just happens to you. It's something you actively cultivate.
Okay, so that's a pretty different perspective from the romantic ideal of love at first sight.
It is, but think about it. If love is just a feeling, something beyond our control, then we're at the mercy of fate. But if we see it as a choice, a deliberate act of will, it becomes much more empowering.
So I'm not just waiting around for the right person to appear. I'm actively choosing to build a loving relationship with someone who shares my values and goals. But does that mean we have to force ourselves to love anyone, even if we're not compatible?
Not at all. It's not about forcing anything. It's about recognizing that we have the capacity to love anyone, as long as our goals and values are aligned.
Okay, that's a really interesting idea. So instead of looking for that one perfect person, we're looking for someone who inspires us to become our best selves, who supports us on our journey. But what about all the baggage we bring into relationships? Our insecurities, our need for validation, the fear of getting hurt. How do we deal with that?
That's where self-love comes in. Adler believed that if we don't love and accept ourselves, it's incredibly difficult to truly love and accept others. We end up projecting our insecurities onto our partners, seeking validation and reassurance instead of building that strong foundation within ourselves first.
Yeah, like that boy who was afraid of the dark. He wasn't actually trying to overcome his fear. He was seeking comfort from his mother.
Exactly. And that kind of dynamic can play out in all sorts of relationships, not just between parents and children. We might find ourselves clinging to a partner, seeking their approval, to feel good about ourselves instead of recognizing our own inherent worth.
It's like we're looking for someone else to fill a void that only we can fill.
That's a great way to put it. And that brings us back to the importance of setting healthy boundaries, something we touched on earlier. Boundaries are essential for protecting our own well-being and for creating a space where we can show up authentically in our relationships.
Okay, so how do we actually set healthy boundaries? Especially if we're not used to doing that.
It starts with becoming aware of your own needs and limits. Ask yourself, what am I comfortable with? What are my non-negotiables? What behaviors drain my energy or make me feel disrespected?
So it's about knowing myself, knowing what I'm willing to tolerate and what I absolutely won't put up with.
Exactly. And once you have a sense of your own boundaries, it's important to communicate them clearly and respectfully to your partner. Remember, boundaries aren't about controlling the other person. They're about taking responsibility.
Right. It's not about
Yeah.
devising ultimatums or trying to manipulate someone into behaving the way we want them to. It's about being honest about our needs and creating a relationship dynamic that feels safe and supportive for both people.
Exactly. And this ties back to the idea of love as a collaborative effort. When we have healthy boundaries in place, we can show up more fully in our relationships without resentment or fear, and that allows for deeper connection and more authentic love.
This is all making so much sense. One concept that really resonated with me was the idea of striving for the best possible parting in all our relationships.
Ah, yes, that's such a beautiful and poignant concept. It reminds us that all relationships, no matter how strong or loving, are ultimately temporary.
Yeah, I know it sounds a bit sad, but there's also a sense of freedom in that, right? It's about appreciating each moment, knowing that nothing lasts forever.
You're absolutely right. And striving for the best possible parting means approaching each interaction with intention and gratitude. It means making sure we're showing up as our best selves, contributing to the other person's well-being, and creating memories that we'll cherish even when the relationship has run its course.
It's about letting go without regrets, knowing that we've done our best to nurture the connection and honor the time we've had together.
Exactly. And this perspective can really shift our mindset from one of scarcity to one of abundance, instead of clinging to relationships. Out of fear of loss, we can appreciate the present moment and focus on creating meaningful experiences that will enrich our lives, regardless of how long they last.
This is all so profound. It's making me think about how we often view certain professions as more prestigious or valuable than others. But Adler believed that all professions are honorable, as long as they contribute to the well-being of society.
That's right. He believed in the importance of the division of labor, how we each have unique talents and skills that we can offer to the community.
So it's not about the job title or the salary. It's about the attitude we bring to our work and the contribution we make to the greater good.
Exactly. A teacher who inspires young minds is just as valuable as a doctor who heals the sick or a sanitation worker who keeps our cities clean. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected and that every role, every job plays a vital part in the functioning of society.
I like that it's a reminder to focus on our own contributions and to appreciate the diversity of talents and skills that make our world such a rich and vibrant place.
Absolutely. And it brings us to a key concept we've been dancing around throughout this entire dive, the separation of tasks. Instead of comparing ourselves to others or feeling envious of their success, we can choose to focus on our own lane, to put in the effort to excel in our chosen field, and to find satisfaction in the process of contributing.
It's about shifting from a mindset of competition to one of collaboration, recognizing that we're all in this together and that everyone has something valuable to offer.
You're getting it. It's not about seeking external validation or comparing ourselves to some arbitrary standard of success. It's about finding joy and fulfillment in the act of contributing, regardless of the outcome or recognition we receive. It's about doing the work because it matters to us, because it aligns with our values, and because it allows us to make a positive impact on the world.
And ultimately, that's what brings us to the core of Adlerian psychology, the idea that encapsulates everything we've been talking about, the courage to be happy.
Exactly. The courage to be happy, it sounds so simple, yet it can be incredibly challenging because true happiness in the Adlerian sense isn't something that just happens to us. It's a choice. It's a way of being that requires courage, self-awareness, and a willingness to embrace the full spectrum of human experience.
So it's not about denying the challenges or pretending that life is always perfect.
Not at all. It's about acknowledging the difficulties, the pain, the heartbreak that are inevitable parts of life. But it's also about choosing to focus on what we can control, to cultivate gratitude for the good things, and to find meaning and purpose even in the midst of adversity.
It's about recognizing that happiness isn't a destination. It's a journey. It's an ongoing process of growth and evolution that requires constant effort and attention.
You said it's about tending to our own inner garden, weeding out the negative thoughts, nurturing the positive ones, and creating the conditions that allow joy to blossom.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on what it means to live a truly happy and fulfilling life.
I'm so glad to hear that. Remember, Adlerian psychology provides a powerful framework, but ultimately, the journey is yours to create.
Well said. Before we sign off, I have one final question to leave our listeners with. Adler said that the target of love can be anyone. So I ask you, if anyone can be the target of love, what does that tell us about the nature of love itself? Is it about finding that perfect person, or is it about choosing to see the inherent worth and potential in every human being we encounter?
That's a profound question. Adler gives us a great foundation for understanding ourselves and our relationships. Now it's up to each of you to take these ideas and see where they lead you.
Wonderful. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the courage to be happy. We hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as we have. Until next time, Keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep embracing the power of connection and growth.